Aaron Keller detailed all of the reasons they've changed the format in Overwatch's history, culminating in announcing that they're going to be doing tests with 6v6. Now let's try to piece together the roadmap, as well as give you guys an outline for what I think you can expect surrounding all of this, because I have some bold predictions on how this is going to pan out, and we'll see. First of all, it seems the reasons why they took so long to talk about this is because they have optimized technical performance issues to consider, especially with the engine upgrades and the graphics and UI and all the extra particle effects that happen in Overwatch 2. The engine is designed with 5v5 in mind and plays on older systems. So while they're going to attempt to make tests for 6v6, they say it's going to take at least several seasons to accomplish. So to prepare the game to do the test, that has to be done first, and it's going to take a while. But they are working on it. And knowing the way they've been handling Overwatch 2, they really do not want to ever overpromise and underdeliver ever again. So they'd probably rather err on the side of not saying anything about 6v6, even to the point of it seeming strange for so long as they gather the resources and stabilize to be able to even consider it. This is a very expensive idea for them to do. Keep that in mind. So I certainly hope we feel at the end of it that it was worth all of the dev time, because that was the major reason why I didn't want us to do it, but enough of the community want it to exist, and I have to admit I am very curious to what the results will be, because we don't really know. It's one thing to test a PUG server in a custom game with a bunch of players that are like-minded anyway. All of that changes when it goes into the real game and players are trying to exploit the system, playing to win. Or worse yet, when the game is more about enabling teamwork and your team doesn't work. As Aaron says, the lows can be very low. They're looking at running a series of events to try out different core team composition formats in Overwatch 2. They're going to test different forms of 6v6 in the game to gauge the results. This is pretty open-ended, but that could mean 6v6 open queue. It could mean 6v6 roll queue. He goes on to kind of hint that there could be a hybrid between the two. Maybe they matchmake first and you soft roll lock as you're in the game, or maybe there's a swap role function. Maybe there's a dedicated flex role that can play any role. There's a lot of ways they could try to do it. I would say that last one sounds kind of possible because he did go at length to explain the extra depth from being able to swap from different roles. So that's the one I'm kind of putting money on, which is SVB's idea. And if he's getting his, then I better be expecting a hero draft or ban mode, which both of us wanted anyway. But again, all of that in the kind of far future, months and months away, several seasons. But in the near term, they are aiming at season 13 for a quick play hack that's going to be bringing up the freedom in an Overwatch match without the severity of the issues that accompanied that freedom from open queue. He says, for instance, we think there could be other ways of putting a team together that aren't quite as rigid as a set composition, but not as loose as open queue. And that's going to be the quick play hack in season 13. I'm curious, which role should get a flex role? Surely if it was a damage, you would always flex to another tank, right? Because they're kind of broken inherently. Do we really want 3 supports? I don't know. I'm curious about it, but we know that one will not be 6v6 because it's too soon. The goal of that one is to address a different complaint that Overwatch matches start to feel too samey, which I kind of get, because a lot of the way the fights can pan out, the typical swaps people are going to do, you either make that player, you don't. The formula is kind of set when everyone understands the meta. Whereas with bigger, widespread options, players have the option to do crazier things, which will shake up your experience. Make it more chaotic, sometimes make it worse, with a lower low, potentially, as Aaron said, but the higher highs of the novelty may be worth it for some players. He says the outcome of these tests would give us valuable information to consider moving forward. We'd run the tests a few weeks and gauge interest from the community. Then we'd measure the impact it had on the other experiences in Overwatch 2, like 5v5, arcade, etc. Those comparisons are really important. I'll talk about that more in a sec. We'd take the lessons from this playtest to see what we can learn about the mode within the current game ecosystem and for the future of Overwatch. We would reflect carefully on the learnings from that, whatever test we run, and explore how to best give players what's being asked for, whether that's a world of 5v5, 6v6, or even both. Is for our future selves to figure out. Also in the future, he's worried about how the heck would we even make queue times work at all, with no faith that it can. But maybe the community votes sort of with their playtime that they would rather wait perhaps double as long in queue in order to have 6v6. I want to talk more about this as well. Now, because I love you guys, I put in the blood, sweat, and tears to construct a roadmap towards 6v6. As you can tell, I'm an aspiring artist. I've applied many times to work for the Blizzard art team, and they never seem to call me back, and I don't know why. I think it's probably bias based on my coverage of their game. But anyway, today is July 29th. There's about 1 month left of Season 11, and there's a few key things to look at into the future. Aaron said it's going to take them several seasons as they work on the technical requirements for 6v6 in Overwatch 2, across the many systems it plays on, especially, because they will want them to all run together. It looks like the first, let's say, retro format change is in Season 13, or approximately 3 months away. Keep in mind, we just got the quick play hacked with the pickable passives, which is more of a 5v5 route. It'll be interesting to see what they do over this next year or so, because in the dev blog, Aaron did say they're focusing on 5v5 and making it better, while also doing this. We'll have to track what percentage of dev time goes in either direction, and perhaps there's other quick play hacks on the timetable, or other changes to 5v5 we're yet to even talk about. Remember, this dev blog is mostly focused on the 6v6 conversation itself, but a key takeaway is they're using all of these learnings to improve the game in every way in any format they might keep or not. It seems to me that 5v5 might go down a more individualistic, self-sufficiency route, and maybe 6v6 aims to have bigger moments, more freedom, and more teamwork required. Okay, further on the calendar now, while Season 14 is going to be one of the several seasons they could use to work on 6v6, try to keep in mind that the Blizzard offices close for a significant period of time during this period, which is why last year when Mauga came out, the hotfix system was broken and they couldn't patch him. That's not to say we won't have cool things in this season. It's that as they're working behind the scenes, and Aaron says we need several seasons, you kind of have to pick apart and maybe know why he's projecting it that far. Us as consumers, we just sort of expect these marvelous video games to work, usually not really understanding the outrageous amount of work it takes for them to function at all. I err on the side of assuming Aaron would have chosen to not say anything if he thought there was any chance they couldn't do it. Like, let's say they come up against a technical roadblock or something. I don't see that happening, but equally, with so much time required, it may take more time than he's speculating here. Several seasons could be 3 or more than that. We just know it's not 2. Otherwise, he would have said 2 or 1. So I think it's pretty reasonable to place any 6v6 test at its earliest in Season 15, especially because Season 14 has the holidays and they're going to be off. Seems like a safe bet to me. But if I had to guess, I would say all the way up to Season 16 as like the final destination if they need to stretch and expand the schedule for this, which already would be getting us into Q2 of next year. And by then, the conversation might evolve even further. They'll likely keep talking about it and thinking about it and maybe publicly talking about it, hopefully. So as they're working on the tech of it, we can start debating some of the very crucial decisions that probably should be made about it. Is it just a straight up Overwatch classic? I mean, they've got the branding sitting right there. Regardless of what I think about it, people like it, or at least they say they do. The question is, which version did they like? Because we tend to forget somehow as an Overwatch community that the game has evolved so many times. Constantly, with patches, new hero additions, and I think it's more respectful to the game to view it as a fluid entity as opposed to say, this is the real rules of Overwatch. Because the truth is, there never was any. And that's where a lot of the nostalgia comes lacking for me, because people argue 2016 Game of the Year Overwatch won that based on its competitive implications. Meanwhile, the first competitive system had sudden death coin flip in it, and the heroes were massively imbalanced and nobody knew how to play. The gameplay for 2016 was terrible. Whatever competitive tryhardy urges you have that makes you love this game on that level wasn't the reason it won Game of the Year. Almost nothing to do with it. Let's now discuss a little bit more about the process of adding this to the game and what Blizzard is going to be doing during this duration of experimentation. So first, comparing to Overwatch 2 5v5 and even the arcade. So what they're going to do with this side experiment is sort of see the interest as well as the queue times that do happen once it is a playable option. Like, where do the players pull from? Do they stop playing role queue? Do they stop playing ranked? Who are the players from any given role that flock to the new version? One thing that I think is kind of safe to maybe guess is if there is a sizable number of tank players in role queue now that will leave role queue to go play 6v6, is the queue times in 5v5 also get way worse during this test. Because those players got to be going from somewhere, right? My prediction on how these queues are going to work is that there will be a wave of novelty at the start where a lot of players that maybe had at one time played Rein Zarya at any point in Overwatch's life, right? They're going to flock to try to play it again. The initial impression is going to be amazing because the willingness of players to play some of those staple team compositions that people loved playing in Overwatch 1 is going to be quite high. But that was never the problem or criticism of Overwatch 1 6v6. It was that a big percentage of the player base didn't do that. And you needed tank synergy to feel like you functioned as a team. And the team that had it oppressed the team that didn't. But what are the alternative timelines if I'm wrong? I think the low lows will be apparent, but maybe the big moments, the chaos, the more abilities, the more players, the ease to blend into the team and not necessarily have to perform your best all the time, maybe all of these benefits make 6v6 a more popular mode. Blizzard will be looking to probably gauge at least as much interest as OpenQ has now, because that also was a major format change that they decidedly put back into the game after popular interest. Certain sub-communities like South Korea, which is extremely competitive, or casual players who just want to queue damage without needing to wait, are the players that like OpenQ the best. There is a world where they replace the main role queue with 6v6 role queue, but I also see a world where they replace open queue as the alternate main queue with 6v6 open queue. Because hey, it's kind of chaos in there anyway, right? But I don't think the 6v6 crowd want that. I think they want 6v6 role queue, which I think is probably tricky to maintain 3 separate main queues. In any case, 2 versions of role queue compete against each other, which would have to make queues worse in both. While Aaron leaves the door open for any possibility, I don't know what data they would need in order to justify that route. I think it's more likely that we pick one of the 2 for the main role queue mode and take whatever lessons we have from the experiment into the new future of the game. For them to switch over to 6v6 role queue entirely, dropping 5v5 and Giga Tanks and all that, I think what they would need to see is the queue times not get too bad. They are going to get worse, undoubtedly, because tank just isn't that popular. But if community consensus seems to be down with waiting longer for those queues to play a game experience they like better, that is what we need. So instead, the alternate timeline for me would look something like early hype, everything's perfect. The queue times gradually get a bit worse, but the popular consensus is that's okay, it's worth the trade-offs. And we end the entire experience realizing that a lot of the things we complained about in Overwatch 1 is what made it special. And we're just gonna have to accept that there's going to be low lows sometimes. And trying to maintain some mystique of competitive normalcy is a trade-off that we're not willing to have to lose those higher highs. I, of course, prefer the reliability of 5v5, to be able to move around the map, not get jammed up in chokes, generally play whatever I want, see a lot of different heroes as well, because for me, balance means hero diversity, and 6v6 as a format has always proven to promote meta synergies, which block out a huge percentage of the characters from being viable whatsoever, at least for the average player until you're actually a specialist in them. And oddly enough, that's sort of made a more reliable game. Like, if you had a throw pick on your team, at least you knew what to blame for while you're losing. Whereas in 5v5, you always have to blame, well, they're using this pick against us, we have to do something about it immediately. In 6v6, we had the luxury of complaining and dreaming that balance was going to fix it. With the intentional asymmetric nature of 5v5, it's assumed balance can't fix it, ignoring kind of like balance wasn't ever supposed to fix it. Hero diversity was a goal of 5v5. If I thought we could play Reinhardt and Winston comps till the end of time, I would be totally for this idea. But the devs made it clear that they struggle to be able to make new characters that fit that archetype, and seemingly find it easier to make shooter tanks, with guns, shouts, and mobility, as opposed to facilitator tanks that very invested Overwatch players appreciate, but casuals kind of opted out of ever touching, causing for a tank player drought throughout the 3 years of open queue, and then extremely long queue times, especially for damage, as Aaron Keller cites, through the history of role queue, when they demanded someone plays tank in these games. As long as the experiment runs long enough and there's a dedicated player base that tries to break the meta of the mode, I think we're going to quickly find that there's a lot of Roadhog style tanks that are now in 6v6. And I really think the average player felt like Roadhog in Overwatch 1 was a throw pick because the tank synergy of two defensive enabling tanks more or less hard countered any Roadhog style tank. What I mean is, you think Hog like counters Winston and Diva, maybe individually. They try to dive, he hooks them, you win. Well, the two of them working together, there was almost no era of the game where Hog was a stable counter pick to them, if the Winston Diva had synergy. If they didn't, then maybe it's okay, but this is kind of the logic of the high-level aspect of the game. High-level players that understand the principle that I'm saying, which kind of breaks your brain a little bit, like, oh, wait, Winston can counter Roadhog? It's like, yeah, because he crawls over your team, gets masked by the Matrix. Hog doesn't do anything during the engage timing, doesn't get impact as the Winston does, and a character like Hog, unless you were very skilled at him and a specialist, was kind of just a throw most of the time. There's other picks too, like I always felt Zarya was super easy to go against a Hog. It took way more finesse for the Hog to ever hook a squishy, and the tanks could cover each other from his damage until he got like overbuffed for sure, but that is just him being forced. That's not his mechanics working. I'm curious to how these other shotgun tanks in Overwatch 2 function in a similar way up against the players that know how to do these tank synergies. So the players from Overwatch 2 are going to be screwed in this mode, at least to start. There's going to be a huge learning curve because it's an entirely different way to play tank. It's way more about your movement and cooldown cycling with your teammate. There's a bit of that in Overwatch 2, but that was the entire tank experience in Overwatch 1, which if the enemy tanks didn't do it, you would destroy them. I'm thinking a character like Doomfist has just the ability set that can work against two tanks, but there's other ones that I'm a little bit more skeptical of. The 6v6 proponents typically argue that having the other tank mitigated your downsides, but I think the most optimal way to play almost always was having two tanks that could mitigate. Having any tank that didn't mitigate was always a huge liability. My opinion right now is that the queue time issue will rear its ugly head, maybe not at the start, but eventually, as I'm of the belief that there is nothing you could do to the tank role to make it appropriately popular for a long stretch of time. They could make it so Aaron Keller personally handed you a cookie through your computer each time you hit tank, and people would still not want to do it. Then another consideration to make, and they did say they're doing multiple 6v6 tests, how the heck are they going to balance it? Are we going to get a complete overhaul power creep version of 6v6? Because that's what it would need for that mode to play well, because otherwise the synergies get obviously out of control. The argument that 6v6 proponents have that it could be balanced better is that those things have to be nerfed, right? No one would disagree that out of the box, like the AoE healing and the other synergies that can stack in a death ball, no one's thought that was like healthy for the game, right? We would all agree about that. There's other considerations too, like how far are they going with this? It would be a bit easier, I think, if they just used the live patch, but that's not what 6v6ers want. Then on top of it, there's a long list of Overwatch 2 improvements. How many of those should be kept in the 6v6 version of the game? I mean, some of them aren't improvements necessarily, like role passives are still pretty controversial, but there's also self-healing on top of that, but maybe that would actually help enable team comps that weren't entirely about deathballing. I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of Overwatch 2 players that might not even know what a lot of these terms even are. They don't know what an off tank is, or a main tank, why you need one, or perhaps even what Aaron means when he talks about the death ball style gameplay. This is a video from July of 2016, discussing both its natural playstyle and natural counters. The term death ball actually comes from StarCraft, another Blizzard Entertainment esport game, and it's just a formation that wants to play close together, making use of a synergy like Reinhardt and Zarya, a melee tank that likes to deal damage at close range, and a brawler enabler tank that can bubble him while he does it. This, of course, got expanded and more powerful over time as more and more heroes enabled the playstyle rather than countered it. The worst offender being Brigitte, who was a tank support hybrid with AoE healing and dueling, enabling the GOATS comp for way too long, which is the name of the pro team that pioneered its use in Tier 2 Overwatch, consisting of 3 tanks and 3 supports. And the principles of why a character like Pharah counteracted eventually the GOATS comp are kind of clear. On more wide open maps with high ground or vertical movement capabilities for a character like Pharah, spam damage, off angles, those can counter the death ball, and I'm at least optimistic that we won't get stuck at chokes like we were in Overwatch 1 because the map design is so much better now. Next up, What to expect? Another scorching hot take. Strap in for this one because I want you to pay close attention for when this actually comes months down the line. A big part of the counter picking issue in the tank category is due to the offensive nature of the kits. And while the argument has been so far that you can compensate for that tank's weakness, quote unquote, I think the bigger reality for at least the mass player base is that it's still going to feel like a major detriment to have the wrong tank on your team. It'll be the same problem we had, just with another player on the server. Let me give you an example, okay? Let's say your tanks want to play a comp that I've seen people leave comments about that, oh my God, this sounds so oppressive, so strong. Junker Queen Mauga, 2 shouts, and they both have so much damage. They both get to shout. They'll be life stealing and Queen is stealing. To me, what that sounds like is Overwatch 1. Let's pick 2 Roadhogs. Like that, like, okay, there was some eras of the game where like Ball Hog near the twilight end of Overwatch 1 was like the ranked meta, mainly because like tanks were so weak in a way that the best you could do is this like solo self-sufficiency deathmatch route. So there was a small little sliver of time where that was ranked viable in Overwatch 1, but also Overwatch League wasn't on during this time, I think, and a lot of other factors. The vast majority of the time, you would say these shieldless, defenseless tanks were hilariously easy to counter because just like you feel like an anti-nade can come out of nowhere, now, when she only has 1 tank to protect her, that enemy team could have Sigma and Diva, 2 tanks that could counter both your tanks. And maybe we learn how to adapt to this and say, well, maybe the real meta combination is like using the Queen with a Zarya so she can be bubbled like an old school Reinhardt to go in, have an extra shield, cleave on that. There might be a meta solution to this, but my issue has never been with the meta theory crafting potential for players that know how to play. The issue for me is players don't want to do that oftentimes. They want to do the really bad comp. And you're going to get that really bad comp on your team, and you're going to go up against 2 damage mitigation tanks, and now your tanks can't shoot the enemy and do any of the things they're supposed to do. Queen tries to go in, she gets rocked. Mauga tries to shout, there's Matrix, Sig Suck, and a shield, which is blocking all of their damage always. And their damage is pretty decent. To me, there's like a massive, massive possibility for tank gap to be so much worse. And it has nothing to do with the number of tanks on the field. It has to do with the types of design they made for Overwatch 2 in order to make these tanks fun. High risk, high reward. It's going to be some popular example, like Doomfist is a popular hero. Maybe he becomes super easy to counter in this. I don't know what it is specifically, but it'll be some example like that. In Overwatch 1, it was Roadhog or Wrecking Ball, where a lot of players had no idea how to play around these picks, and they were easily countered. People say there wasn't counter picking on the tank line in Overwatch 1, but there's certain tanks you definitely could. And if you look back to some of my Overwatch 1 smurfing guides, that was the easiest thing to do, is to pick Zarya up against a Roadhog or a Sigma, easy roll over them with no effort, playing on a controller. Barely can aim, doesn't matter. The mechanics of the characters hard countered those picks. Just run them down. It existed in Overwatch 1, it just wasn't as well known, and maybe the balance of it made certain tanks we mostly just agreed it's okay for them to be hard countered with the mechanics alone. Do you guys really think this game wasn't obnoxious before 5v5? Like, come on, man. Thanks for catching L's the whole lifetime of this game. So yeah, I'm not at all nervous for them to make this. I'm so thrilled that this is happening because I feel a lot of the arguments that I have voiced about this have been some of the loudest and the most unique. Like, I share a lot of points with others that are either content or prefer 5v5, but I also think I've really gone through to find the receipts and examples of the issues that everyone's forgetting. And when we get to see those again, I'm going to expect a formally written apology from every single one of you who has talked mad shit to me for a year, because I've basically been bullied in this community as a shill for, you know, remembering history accurately. That's been fun for me. Sarcasm. Guys, that's it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to click subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.